You are on the ground trying to grab a weapon as a blood skeleton raises its axe. You feel as though your life will come to an end as you frantically try to defend yourself. Then from behind the blood skeleton you see a warhammer come into view as it smashes the creature to pieces. An arm reaches out to help you up. You're not sure what's going on and why the dead are alive, but you are thankful you're not one of them. Heron tells you to grab your gear and that you both need to head off to the old church before the wolves arrive. You grab what you can and you head off with Heron. Let's get into this. Welcome to Solitary RPG. Hello and welcome to Scene 2 of The Acid Queen. And in this video, we're going to focus on what a scene is. And I think this is important because we will be using the Mythic 2nd Edition GM emulator to kind of play this adventure out. And that system is designed on scenes. And before we can kind of proceed, we need to kind of get a good understanding of what a scene is. I do think sometimes players may get a little kind of wrapped up into making sure their scenes are like full of a bunch of stuff, and they don't have to be. Scenes can be very short, just like the one we just read, or they can be a little bit longer. It's really up to you. But just like in televisions and movies, all scenes are just little parts of a larger story. And they're important with the Mythic system or the GM emulator because at the beginning of each new scene, you're going to roll a dice and compare it to the chaos factor to determine if your story is interrupted or if it continues on as normal. We haven't done it yet, and we probably won't be rolling that for a little bit until we actually get into the adventure. Right now, I'm just trying to set the, we could say backstory, but to me, it's just the foundation of what our story is going to be about. And I'm trying to build on this to put my characters in a decision point of what they're going to have to do. But we have to meet our characters and we have to get the story going. So we haven't been doing those roles, but soon we will be making those roles. Each scene has basically a beginning and an end. There is no right or wrong way to determine your scene or how long it should be. This is really up to you as the player. A scene should end when you feel you have accomplished the task. So if you've set up a scene and you're like, okay, my characters need to investigate this room and look for a clue, and you kind of walk through that and you do the investigation, you're looking for the clue, you've accomplished the clue, you conclude the scene, and then you move on to the next scene. And you just kind of keep building these little scenes. They're kind of like Legos, building blocks. You're just kind of building them, and then by the time you're done, you have your story. For the sake of this particular scene, the Heron destroys the blood skeleton, and you notice I didn't do any combat. I just simply made that up because, again, we're just creating a foundation. If I wanted to play out that combat, probably would have added a little bit more time to the story doing the combat part, but it was just one encounter taking place or one combat thing taking place with, in my opinion, a weaker foe. So I just narratively worked that out because I thought it was kind of cool, and that's what I wanted to do for the scene. I didn't want to get bogged down with a mindless combat. It was not important to me to play out that combat. What was more important is that Heron saved unknown character, which is going to be our PC, from danger, and we just moved on. We made it dramatic, and that's kind of what you can do when you're playing solo. You don't have to play out every combat. You can just have a little bit of a narrative story and work it out because it was a lesser foe, wasn't important, and it was more dramatic for concluding the scene than doing anything else. So that's what we did there. Now, when you play out these scenes, each scene will add new elements or complications to your adventure. This will happen either by the narrative that is unfolding as you're rolling dice and looking at your oracle. Looking at scene 2, we added some new elements to our game. That is your PC. The unknown person that was on the ground about to get axed by the blood skeleton is going to be the player character that I'm going to move forward with. And we still haven't really decided on rules. We haven't made characters, anything. We're just kind of unfolding this adventure as we move forward. So we'll still have to do all those important things, but this would be a good time to sit back and do a little bit of reflecting on scene 2 to create our PC. Pick a name, maybe pick some characteristics of our PC, and just start writing some information down so that we can start moving the story forward. We can also do the same thing with Heron. Even though I know Heron's going to be an NPC, find some sort of image to represent the NPC and just start writing some backstory, like who is he, and make him part of our world. So if we take a look at our adventure sheet, I've seen 2 here. Heron saves you, so you is going to be the PC. And I've also introduced the blood skeleton. What's a blood skeleton? This is going to be the Acid Queen's army of the undead. So anything that's pretty much undead is going to be included in this adventure. I'm not going to get into like dragons and trolls and all this other kind of high fantasy stuff. I'm creating a different kind of a world, and I have a lot of this stuff mapped out from my previous adventure. But I'm creating this world that's going to be her creating an army of the undead in some very in a different manner. She's not using spells to raise the dead. She is actually taking humans and converting them into the undead. And we'll get into that as this story unfolds. But I introduced a blood skeleton because I've created a whole life cycle of how her abilities to do this, how the person goes through the transformation into what is going to be ultimately a skeleton warrior, because that will be the elite of this army. But there's a transformation process. So you're going to see zombies, ghouls. I'm calling them blood skeletons, which is basically a ghoul after they've shed all their flesh and organs. There's still like a red tint to them because there's still like blood in their bones. And then as they get trained and become better and their bones dry out and they bleach out from the sun, they'll become skeleton warriors, which will be the big bad enemies that will be the bulk of her army. Whole nother thing, but we'll get to that as we go. So we've introduced them. So this is basically all scene 2 is going to have is Heron saves you. So that's your PC. And we've introduced the blood skeleton. Not a lot of information, nothing really exciting in scene 2, but we're going to keep track of it because part of Mythic is every 5 scenes you can choose your result on the chart. It's something I talked about in my review of Mythic 2nd edition. You can go back and watch that if you're interested. We also want to update our nested character list and make sure it's included into our adventure list here. And all I'm going to do is just add in, blood skeleton as number 2. So this adds in another element into the Acid Queen's army. So if we ever end up rolling on this chart, we could roll a blood skeleton for an encounter. That's how that works. But I don't need to add it here to the actual adventure list because I am kind of just putting everything associated with the Acid Queen under one roll. And I can add this particular thing multiple times on my character list. It's truly up to me. And I'll probably add, like every 2, I'll have the Acid Queen and the Kingdom and the Mountain on my charts just to make sure I have chances to roll for them. Anyways, yeah, so that's kind of where we're at with the adventure. It's also going to be a good time to actually roll on our oracle for one particular question. So when rolling on an oracle, you want to make sure the roll is important and that you're prepared for the result. You don't want to just constantly result to rolling on oracles. It is fun to roll on oracles. It is fun to get the information that you're looking for. However, with Mythic, rolling on an oracle can alter your story quite a bit. And you just want to be prepared for that. You want to make sure your questions are important to the story that you're trying to create with the dice. but also you want to make sure your question is broad enough that you can interpret the result on the rolls so that you can move your story forward and incorporate it. So you don't want to get too specific in your question. Up to this point, if we're just reading our story and kind of getting everything set, I think the most important question at this point would be, is our PC injured? Does our PC, like, it was a battle, there was all kinds of stuff going on, he was fighting with a blood skeleton, there could have been more of a fight prior, so there's a good possibility that he's injured. But we do want to determine that, but I don't want to say how bad the injury is. So that's why I'm just keeping it. Is my character or is my PC injured? Yes or no. And if I get like an extreme yes, then maybe that's when I'll result to, okay, he's injured bad enough, he may need help walking. And if I get a no but, then we'll, what could I possibly do for this particular story if I got a no but? Not a whole lot. But maybe it's a no but and he's like really fresh and he has no exhaustion from the battle. We can keep it kind of small. But when you ask questions on the Oracle chart, you always want to think about it for a little bit before you ask your question and kind of know, okay, these are what my results are possibly going to be. Am I prepared for those in my story? And if you don't feel like you can come up with good solutions in both directions to keep your story going forward, maybe give your question another think and really kind of break it down. But always consider your options before rolling on your Oracle. It's very helpful with gaming. Now we're using Mythic 2nd Edition, the GM emulator. When I purchased my book from DriveThruRPG, I got the PDF plus the book. I like getting PDFs of books like this, kind of tool books that we use for gaming. That way I can just print out the pages I need. I don't need a big book on my table. I just need a few pages. So that's what we did here. We're going to consider, we're at 5 for the chaos factor right now. I'm not tracking chaos factor. We could go up or down because of everything that's happening right now. We're at the end of a battle and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just going to keep it at 5. I'm going to keep it simple for right now until we get into the actual core part of our adventure. 50-50 would be the starting point for everything. But because we were in a battle, my character was being attacked by a blood skeleton, we're going to go that it's more likely that he's injured. We have 3 numbers here. We have a small 13. So if I roll a 13 or under, I get a yes and. If I roll 14 to 65, the big number in the center, that means I got a yes. If I roll 66 to 93, that means I've got a no. And if I roll 94 to 100, that means I got a no and result. We're just going to ask a very basic question. Is my PC, my character, injured? We're not defining the injury. We're not saying how bad the injury is. We'll let the dice unfold that for us. So we're just going to roll our 2 d10s. I rolled a 15, so I got a 10 and a 5. So basically, we got a yes, he's injured, but not the extreme. We just got yes, he's injured. So now narratively, we can come up with what that injury is. We can just say it's, we didn't get that extreme result. Just going to say he's got some injuries. We can also, since we're moving to the church, we could also use that to slow down their movement. Like, he's injured. He's going to slow his movement down going to the church. So we will work that out into the next scene. But I think on our adventure journal, we're going to want to mention that our PC is injured. That way we have a record of that, so when we set up our next scene. But yeah, I don't want to make my Oracle questions very detailed. I want to keep them simple, and that gives me the ability to narrate what the results are on my dice so I can keep my story moving forward. Now, we're also going to want to start, like I said, building our characters. We want to build Heron and we want to build our PC. Haven't named them yet, but if you know my channel, if you know anything about where I've come from, I always name my main characters Bastine. It's just a name I like. There's a lot behind that name, but it is who I name my characters, at least one of my characters, because it's easy and I like using it. So Bastine will be this PC. So now I want to introduce you to something else. So character sheets don't have to be about stats. Don't focus on the stats of the character sheets. Those are rules. And yes, we need those. We're going to work on those. We're going to create all that when we get our rule set in place. But it's always good to also work on who these characters are. So we know Bastine is going to be one of our main characters. So what's their backstory? Where did they come from? We also know the same thing about Heron. And so we want to create little character sheets for them. I really like what Runehammer did when they did 5e hardcore mode, because one of the character sheets, it was a two-part character sheet. You had your statistics part, which is fine, but then they just had like this backstory part where you could put your character profile and you could add information. So I like using these just to create backstory and to keep track of certain pieces of information. I'd rather focus on this than the character sheet. The stats and all the particular things, yeah, that's cool. And I do need to look at that, but this is something I really do like looking at. So I'm also going to share with you, I bought some AI images. I'm not going to call it AI art because I don't think what AI is doing is considered art. I consider it an image that was generated from a computer. It is a personal thing that I do. This concept of AI, I don't agree with a lot of what's going on with it. It's out there though. You have to understand it's out there, but I don't have to give it respect and call it art, because to be honest with you, it's not. It is someone putting in prompts into a computer, and that computer is going out grabbing imagery and creating something. So just my take. You do you. If you think it's art, you can call it art. I'm just going to call it an AI image. And I guess it's a big thing on Etsy right now. There are a lot of people generating AI images and selling them in bundles for pennies. I mean, dirt cheap. So I picked one up because I wanted to see what the images were. I liked the images, so I decided to use them for my character profile sheets. And that's what I'm doing here. You got to embrace the world as it changes and deal with it, but I could not find actual art that was affordable for me to run an adventure. And this is kind of that weird, like, I'd love to support artists, and if I was making an actual book, like a game book, I would hire an artist, and I know a few that I would love to hire if I was to do something like that. And I would have them create art for me. But for a solo game, something just for me to keep me interested in my game, the AI images are something that I can swallow. That's the hard pill I can swallow so I can play my game. So I'm okay with that. So anyways, I get these hardcore mode sheets from Runehammer, and I'm just taking these AI images, and I've created a bunch of these sheets so that way I have them at the ready for when new characters and people come into the game. This is probably going to be Heron right here, because I just like that distinguished look. He's a wiser person that has a lot of knowledge of the world. So now I can start giving some background information. Some of the blank boxes, I guess I could put some of the rule concepts if I wanted to. But for the most part, I could just put some basic information. Where did he come from? What's his history? And this is all part of that world building concept. I will also be adding Heron into my world building pocket notebooks that I got from Shield Dice Studios. But for right now, I'm just at the beginning stages of this adventure, and I created a bunch of these profile sheets or these background sheets for my characters and the people that will be in my world, and we'll just be moving forward from here. Having them at the ready is a great way for your adventure. I am torn on which one should be Bastine. I think these are both the same person as far as the image goes with the facial features and stuff, but I think they both also portray a different vibe or a different personality type. Like he's a lot more aggressive, he's a lot more stoic. So this is probably going to be Bastine, and I'll save this one maybe for his brother. I don't know. But yeah, so this is something that I like to do, and then I can keep these if I create really cool backstories and put all the effort in. I can keep them in my world and use them whenever I want. If one of these NPCs or PCs or whoever these folks are end up perishing in the world, then I can actually kind of make them, like, add them into the legend of the world and maybe make their death a little bit more cinematic to the bigger story, and add them into the world as songs of legend or stories of the past or something like that. So anyways, so that wraps up scene 2. This is kind of where everything's at. We've got our oracle, we made a roll, Bastine's injured. Not going to make it a super bad injury. It's just going to be a pretty basic injury, but it's going to have an effect in gameplay, and we'll figure that out when we set up scene 3. We've updated our information on our thing. I just got to write that Bastine's injured. We got our blood skeletons now are part of our world. So now we kind of know what most of the encounters are going to be like. There's always going to be nature that we're going to encounter, such as wildlife, things like that. Plus other encounters in nature are going to be like the terrain and things like that. But we've got some stuff to start working with to really start unfolding our story as we move forward. Thank you for watching, and have a great day. Bye.